With a long list of features, great looks, and up to 49 MPGs combined, this might be the ultimate commuter car. But is it any fun to drive? We have a complete look right now on Driving Sports TV. If you're tired of paying high prices at the gas pump, but you're not really ready yet to jump to a full battery electric, a hybrid is still a great choice. Case in point, this new Kia Niro SX Hybrid. This couples a 1.6-liter four-cylinder engine with an electric motor and a battery to give an astonishing 53 miles to the gallon around town and 45 mpgs on the highway. Of course, this little Niro is more about efficiency than it is performance, so you don't have a lot of power under the hood. This hybrid setup produces 139 horsepower and 195 pound-feet of torque, which should be enough for a little get up and go around town, but it's not going to win any races. The vehicle we're testing today does include a couple options, including that black blade design on the side. Price as you see it here, $36,435 US, including destination. Overall, I think the design actually is pretty cool. The blade is a little bit much, but it is an option. You don't have to get it on the Niro. In fact, it's an extra $195 if you want it. Though Kia calls this a crossover, I call it more a hatchback. And that's simply because lack of ground clearance and it's only front-wheel drive. But that's okay. When you're looking for the best MPGs, this is the right package. Of course, this vehicle is front-wheel drive, and I don't really consider it a crossover. The tires go with that because these are not all-terrains, clearly. What we have here is a nice street tire. It's a Continental Pro Contact, and it is a 225/45 R18 fitment. Yeah, this little car has 18s. Thanks to the squared off shape, we have a lot of capacity in the back here. You're looking at 19.4 cubic feet behind the second row. Fold all the seats flat and you're looking at 54.9 cubic feet overall. Under the floor, we don't have a spare, but we do have a fix-a-flat kit. Oh, and can you sleep in it? Oh, it's tight, all right. Also, the floor on these Kias isn't very strong. I wouldn't trust it to not break. Okay, let's check out the second row. Okay, second row. Oh yeah, plenty of room. Got lots of room for my legs. I'm legs torso proportionate, 6'1". My head fits, my legs fit, my feet fits. I get my own vents as well as a full down armrest with integrated cup holders. Also got a handle here. Help me get out. Okay. Up front. Oh, hello. Thank you, power seat. It's powered on. Nice digital gauge cluster, and then over here we have a second infotainment display, but they are integrated to kind of look like one seamless unit. We've seen that before on other vehicles, specifically Mercedes-Benz did it on the S-Class a few years ago, and now we're starting to see it with some other designs as well. And I actually really like it. I think it's a nice alternative to the whole like stuck on iPad look that we see on a lot of vehicles these days. So starting with this gauge cluster, we have a lot of info we can look at. I can page through lots of data, including engine temperature, safety information, driving info, such as my MPGs and whatnot. It shows that I'm currently averaging 40.4 in a lot of highway driving. In terms of customization, there's not a lot we can do with this display, but we can change between two distinct modes. There's both an eco mode where everything is blue, and then I hit this button down here and it changes to sport mode, and everything kind of goes a little bit maroony. But in terms of actual display changes, you're pretty much stuck with what you got. But it's okay. It's actually a very useful display, and I think it looks pretty good. Now, on this steering wheel, it's kind of funky looking because we have this swooped ring in a ring design. The material feels fairly nice, not like super luxury, but it feels very comfortable, and I like the contouring. The buttons on the left are for the adaptive cruise control with lane centering. We'll test that out in a little bit. On the right, we can control voice commands as well as the stereo system. Behind it, we get paddle shifters. Although this is a dual clutch with a hybrid setup, so sporty driving, it's not really what it's all about, but it's kind of nice that they give a nod to it with those. So the infotainment system here is your typical Kia offering. I really like this main screen. It's very simple. I can tap on the right to go straight to navigation, or I can tap on, let's go back home, I can tap on the left and it'll take me right to the music system. Moving on, they have a lot more stuff in here. Specifically, I can look at the hybrid power flow system. You can see the battery, the electric motor, and the gas motor working together to get the vehicle moving, as well as the electric motor use and the average MPGs. We can also go into several modes. There's a valet mode. This is where I would access CarPlay. I can also do climate controls up here, as well as media, and this does support XM satellite radio as well as terrestrial radio stations. Beneath this, I do get the trick little Kia dual mode touch panel. My wife brought up a good point, is like, you have enough room there, why don't you just put 2 rows of buttons instead of making them this fancy switcheroo? I could see that argument. I kind of like it. I think it's cool use of the tech, and it's very clear and easy to use. I do sometimes, however, reach for volume and accidentally touch auto climate, and then it changes, and then I'm not changing volume, I'm changing my temperature. That has happened numerous times. So I think it's maybe a little too sensitive, or maybe move auto climate not so close. Now I got to tap over there. Now I got my volume, and I also have my channel switcher on the right. So that is all pretty normal for a Kia. Moving on down, we have power for mobile devices, USB-A, which is what you use to interface Apple CarPlay or Android Auto, and then USB-C, which is for charging only. Beneath that, we have a wireless charging pad, but without wireless CarPlay, wireless Android Auto. I think it's kind of fruitless. To the left of the USB sockets, we do get a 12 volt, which is nice to see. Those are kind of disappearing on some modern vehicles, and I still personally use them a lot for accessories. I don't know if you do too, but for me, it's something I like to see. Beneath that, we have the seat heaters and coolers, and yes, this has both at this trim level. Got lots of power adjustments to go with those, as well as 2 memory positions so that 2 drivers can have completely different setups. I also get a heated steering wheel, which will be really nice when the weather turns very cold. So the transmission selector, not my favorite design, but it's effective and it works. I can even go all the way down and shift into manual mode. Now, manual mode is more fun in this type of a vehicle than you would get in a traditional automatic, because of course this uses a dual clutch setup, which gives much more direct feel of power from engine to the wheels, as well as shifting through those gears. Naturally, with the paddle shifters, you would think that this is probably fun to drive. And maybe it is. Kias recently have been pretty good in that department. But this isn't super fast. That said, it does have 195 pound-feet of torque, which is pretty good for a vehicle of this size, especially one that is designed more for commuting and to get good MPGs. But do those MPGs meet reality, and does the amount of torque actually deliver a good driving experience? We'll find out in just a couple minutes when we take this for a drive. Last thing I want to cover are the safety aspects. We get blind spot warning, we have collision mitigation, rear camera with cross-traffic alerts. We also get sonars in the front and back for parking, which will also give notification for cross-traffic alerts. So overall, it's a pretty good setup. In terms of design, I kind of dig it. I like the dual displays here. I don't know what's going on over here. Everybody who gets in the car asks me what that is, and I'm like, I don't know. It's some kind of a light. I think it's just for looks. But I like the overall swept dash. I like the feel of the steering wheel. Don't love the design of the steering wheel. Don't love the piano black. That's going to scratch. But I do like these cup holders. Fold them in, and we get lots of cargo space. Push a button, and we have dual cup holders. That's a pretty neat feature. I really like that design. They're also fun to use. Okay, so time to find out if this vehicle delivers when the wheels hit the road. Of course, this is a vehicle that is primarily designed for commuting. I mean, that is why they targeted such high MPGs with this setup. And of course, it gets there through a combination of technologies. Everything from having a sleek exterior for a low drag coefficient to mating an electric motor up to the gas engine, making this a very, very efficient hybrid setup. But the real question is, does it actually get the claimed MPGs? That's always a big question mark when you're looking at these high mileage hybrid setups, because sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. But before we dive into the MPGs, let's get a 0 to 60 out of the way. Now the road surface is a little slick, so we're going to have trouble getting grip. So we're going to go ahead and give it a try anyway. I have transmission in drive, I have the drive mode set to sport, and we're just going to mosh the throttle. And 3, 2, 1, go! Little slow to start. Oh, then it picks up. And come on, get there. 60, 9.19 seconds. Definitely not fast. Now that we got the 0 to 60 out of the way, it's not time to find out if the MPGs meet the measurement yet, because we need to see how well this thing drives, you know? That's obviously going to impact MPGs, and it would be very unfair to drive briskly and then expect it to get ultimate economy. Obviously, the MPG test cycle from the EPA does not take full throttle launches into account. So rolling down the highway, this actually feels pretty comfortable. The seats, a good position. I had lots of controls here to kind of get into a good spot. I even have lumbar control. Visibility is excellent, as you would expect on a vehicle of this design. And the suspension is doing a good job of giving a comfortable ride. Of course, going between drive modes does not affect the suspension because it is not adaptive. You get a single setup either way. But one thing that the drive modes do is to give the throttle more or less aggressive inputs. Obviously in sport, you have the most aggressive. In eco, it's a little more lethargic to get up to speed, and that is because it is aiming for best economy. It is kind of funny in these days of having 20 different drive modes that this one just has 2, eco and sport. That's it. No normal. And honestly, I'm okay with that because I'm going to be driving sport all the time, probably. Or if I'm loafing in traffic, fine, eco. That seems reasonable to me. Even though I don't get a lot of adjustment with this digital gauge cluster, I do like the design. I think it's kind of cool. It's this like faux holographic depth going on here, which of course, the parent company for Kia also owns Genesis, and Genesis has an actual, to goodness, holographic display. So I kind of like the little shout out with this one being kind of a faux hologram. It's kind of neat. Generally, I don't prefer front-wheel drive vehicles. However, it doesn't mean I dislike them. Vehicles like the Honda Civic are some of the best front-wheel drive vehicles you can buy today. Even the Type R from Honda is front-wheel drive, and it has a phenomenal road feel. This vehicle, obviously, it's not equivalent of a Type R, but I feel like it gives a very enjoyable drive. And part of that is the dual clutch transmission. Let me demonstrate. Pop it over to manual, flip between the gears. Let's go ahead and put it into sport here. Pop between gears. Put the throttle in. You can really get that sweet spot, and the shifts are very quick. Of course, it does protect the transmission from spinning too much. So if you're in third, but you're driving too fast, it's not going to let you drop down into second. But within reason, it does let you really find that sweet spot. So using the paddle shifters, you do get very quick shifts. They're almost instantaneous, which is kind of what you would expect in a dual clutch. It also helps transmit as much of that horsepower as possible to the wheels to actually do work. Yeah, this is fun. Ha! Okay, this is very enjoyable to drive. Let's see, throttle in, punch it. Front wheels claw me out of the corner. Yeah, it's pretty good. Now that we established this little Kia Niro is pretty fun to drive considering what it is, let's look at its real reason for existing, economy. So to check this out, I am going to simply switch the drive mode into eco. I'm going to reset the onboard computer, and we have found that even when doing fuel tests, that the onboard computers are actually really accurate these days. So yeah, it's not going to be 100% accurate, but it's going to be pretty close. And I'm just going to basically keep at the speed limit, which is 45-ish on this highway. And we'll drive for about 20 miles and see what kind of MPGs we get out of this. I guess I'm going to dip a little bit up to 50 here. Truth be told, I do live in the Pacific Northwest, and it is not very flat here. So if you live in Kansas, for example, you might get better results than I will get here. Around here, out on the Olympic Peninsula, we have lots of hills. That means both going uphill and going downhill, of course. This actually really gives me a good opportunity to test out the adaptive cruise control system too. Just hit a little button right here, turns on the distance controller, hit the next button to set my target speed, and now it is going to pace the vehicle in front of me, if there were a vehicle in front of me. And then one more button press and I can actually turn on auto steer, which will keep me centered in the middle of the lane. It's a really helpful little tool to have for long distance driving like we're doing right now. So the main reason why this vehicle gets better MPGs in the city than it does on the highway is simply physics, because wind resistance really puts more of a strain on a gas motor, or any motor for that matter, so it has to actually fight its way through the wind. Further, because the electric component is the more efficient component of this vehicle, it is more advantageous to use around town where you're doing stop and go, because of course electric motors have 100% of torque at 0 RPM. So when you're on that cycle of constantly using the electric motor to kind of do the low speed driving, that is where you get the biggest advantage with this vehicle. To say the auto steer function works pretty good. It's a little curvy there, and it did shut down a couple times, but it's not aggravating. It doesn't give me any beeps saying, oh my gosh. It drives pretty nice, and it actually reduces fatigue on these kind of drives because I'm not constantly, steering the wheel. It's doing kind of that first tip in for me, and I'm just keeping my hands on the wheel to making sure that it's tracking where I need it to. It's pretty good. So it is actually running a lot in EV mode right now because I'm on a level surface. The battery is mostly charged. It's just kicking into the gas motor whenever I basically feather in the throttle, which is giving me ridiculously high MPGs. It's saying that I'm getting 199 MPG, but the fact is that I'm just kind of coasting along at a perfectly level surface right here. Pretty soon I'll be hitting a hill, which is going to obviously plummet my MPGs. Everything in this cabin really kind of makes sense. It falls to hand nicely. It looks good. I could really see this as being a really good commuter option for somebody if it gets realistic MPGs. If it really does produce those really high MPGs, totally worth it. Now I am noticing that in eco mode, as I stab the throttle a little bit, it's really slow to come up to speed. And that's obviously for a reason, because if you stab the throttle and it gives a big hit of gas, that works against economy. So it's smoothing out my inputs to create the most easing in, easing out experience possible, all in the name of better economy. And yeah, this does use brake regen. So basically when I put my foot on the brakes, it engages the electric motor and turns it into a generator, which then charges the battery. It's a very smooth process, and honestly, if I didn't know it was doing it, it doesn't feel any different than any other brake pedal, which is a really good thing. Some of the early systems were definitely, they were a little weird to use, but now, yeah, most vehicles, it's pretty smooth. And this one is great. Whereas some hybrids will give you a really basic EV mode that you can switch into. That's sometimes only good for parking lots. Don't really have that option here. The EV system in this vehicle is completely controlled by the vehicle. I have no overriding I can do, which I think is honestly fine. In the Toyota vehicles that do have the option to override with an EV mode, I have found that to be absolutely useless because it only works at speeds under 25 miles per hour. And if you even slightly put the throttle on, it shuts it off immediately. So it's kind of a silly thing to think of an EV mode only on a hybrid because they're just not really designed to provide that experience. Okay, I think it's time to cut to the chase. Let's jump ahead to 20 miles and see what kind of MPGs we get out of this Niro. So at 20 miles, we have 52.4 mpgs, which is well above the estimated 49 mpgs combined. I'd say that's really, really good. Now, the driving we did was a little bit of mixed use, which does kind of give a little bit of an advantage, but I didn't stop very much, which didn't give a lot of regen. I was basically moving along at speeds between 40 and 50 miles per hour for the full 27 minutes. So very, very impressed with the economy figures out of this vehicle. I'm very impressed with this Kia Niro. And overall, it's just a fun car to drive. I think the only real concern is really the price. $36,000 is a lot of money for a commuter car. So if you want to look at average price of a car, you want to look at average MPGs on an average commute, you're looking at more than 50 MPGs with this vehicle, and that is awesome. For Driving Sports TV, I'm Ryan Douthit. Thanks for watching. You're not going to take this thing off-roading, and you're definitely not going to take it racing, but you will win every single day that you have to commute to the office. Please like and subscribe our videos. We make them for you, and I do hope you enjoy them. Even the ones where we don't go off-road.